Good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Weekly Collective Share. So, starting out already irritated this morning.
Yeah, it's been a long morning already. Nope.
Um, so, Sarah and I had this discussion yesterday afternoon. We started so to try to get to the point a little more quickly. These days we're having pre-call discussions and letting ourselves, ruminate on it, which I think made it even worse this morning.
Right.
But that's all right. Because I even did, remember I said I was committing to meditating before we got on this morning, and I did. It seemed to make it even more
You
rocky
did or
today.
didn't?
I did. I did.
Okay.
So, but I think it seemed to make it even more rocky because I think I
I was
need
going to
about,
say, did that make the create the irritation?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So, yeah, I was looking at, so what we started talking about, and so it's going to sound really simple, but there's these things that we're cycling around on is this whole trusting thing, right? And, we were talking and I said, what's interesting is until yesterday morning, so this is so out of practice for me. This is so out of my reality, but as of yesterday morning, I woke up and realized, oh, I haven't meditated since Wednesday. And I didn't even notice, which is so weird, right? Because
Hmm.
usually if I go like one day, I feel like I haven't, honored myself. I haven't done what, like had my time. And it was like, oh, but the ego's going, but oh, it's okay. It's okay because you were happily, doing Thanksgiving and you were happily decorating the house and happily distracting yourself, right? Distracting yourself. And then you have your newest distraction right there.
Right in my lap. He's such a small thing.
So so we were talking about that and it's interesting to see patterns. Well, it's always easier to see it in somebody else than in yourself, right? So the thing is, there's some patterns that are popping up as we come into this new creation that feels like we're cycling back around, and it's almost like I don't want to say we're testing ourselves, but now it's like, well, so now you don't have to take this on. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this in this way anymore, or whatever. And the habit is to say, oh no, but that's okay. It's okay because I'm happy doing this, right? And so that's what's really interesting. So the funny thing was this morning, I haven't I did when I did my meditation, I did actually pull one of the Dark Goddess cards, which I haven't done for a while. And the one that I got was one I hadn't gotten before, but very appropriate because I was like, okay, so let me see what it is for us to look at today, right?
Right. Right.
In a little more clarity as the dog climbs all over you. And
Right.
it was I can't even pronounce the name, Heine Nui Tepo, but the whole thing was about trust.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it was interesting, right? So it says you are being given a second chance. Walk away from a bad situation. Learn to trust your gut feeling. Don't dwell on the past. Learn from your mistakes, but don't take the blame for the mistake of others. Speak up before it's too late. Someone will surprise you. So I thought this was interesting because I'm looking at, okay, so what patterns are coming up for me that are things that I have hidden behind in the past and not recognized them as hiding behind, but as a preference, right? So I haven't yet put my finger on it except, you know, this morning the thing popped up with the one the heating system, right? That popped up like a month ago.
Right.
And it was reset and it had been fine ever since. And then of course nobody was called to come out and check it. And then this morning the same thing happened. And it's happened twice. I've gone to reset the damn system twice and blah blah blah, right? And I'm like, okay, so why am I doing this? I just, what I said a month ago was to my husband, call the guy, call the repair person, have a repair person come in. We have a warranty on the damn house.
Right. Right.
And of course, nobody was called, right? Because, oh, well, no, reset and it's all fine, right? So let's just stick our head back in the sand.
That's
Yeah.
just making me angry.
Yeah. So, and this is a little thing, but it's like, okay, so what is it? This weekend I was sort of feeling a little overwhelmed and thinking about, because yesterday it was funny. After I realized I hadn't meditated since Wednesday, then I got anxious all day. Then it was like this weird anxious thing of like, because then actually there was a part of me that knew I was avoiding something. And how masterfully I did it. Like, oh, well, look, you were just having a good
Right.
weekend. You said all this stuff. So, so it's like, what are we hiding from? Well, we fall into patterns, these patterns, and it's like, okay, well, do I have to take care of everybody else's stuff? Do I have to, I don't have to take care of the house's stuff. Like I don't have to do it. My husband doesn't have to do it. We can have somebody come and do it who can do it, right?
And you've already paid for that privilege.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I don't have to take it on because guess what? Taking it on is a distraction from the stuff that I have now committed to move forward doing. So, then I was looking at, okay, what other patterns are popping up? Um, Old patterns are popping up. And, I committed to writing my book, my first book. I really committed into a program to do that. And I started that. I really started early last week. And it's alternated, it's alternatively exciting and terrifying at the same time. And yeah, the terrifying part makes me want to go crawl under a rock and be like, oh, no, no, I can do this instead. I can do this instead. Or I could go and just do this instead. It's easier. This is what I've always done, or this is
Right.
what I've been doing for 10 years. I can do this way. I don't have to do it differently.
Uh,
Go ahead.
something something just occurred to me in what I've been looking at this morning. Gosh, let me see if I can pull it back in. We're still creating distractions to allow us. We've always used those as cues or mirrors, and now we don't even need those, and we don't know how to do it without those.
Yeah. So we just keep on creating them, right?
Exactly, but yet we don't need them.
Right. And the habit is, oh no, I'll gladly do this because I know how to do this. I can take care of this.
It seems like the path of least resistance. It almost feels like guidance.
Right. Right. But it's actually going, nope, not for me, not my
Right.
responsibility, not for like this is my path. This is for me to focus on. Yes. And so it was funny because I was like, okay. And it's almost like I called myself out on it, right? It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and then it was funny that I pulled that card trust because I'm like, of course, because what did we say it comes down to? It comes down to that it is for us to be very different moving forward, different at a core level from how we have acted and behaved and habitualized before. And we keep on saying we trust, and we've trusted to this point to get to this point enough, right? What we thought was enough,
Right.
right? And then it was like, and what we did, we talked about trust last night, and it was like saying, okay, but when I think about this happening, it's a little overwhelming, right? Like I said, I know once this first book comes out, there's like a whole slew of them to go behind it because I even have them all like lined up in my head. And it isn't that, it's like I've been asking for clarity and this is what's been pushed in front of me and pushed in front of me and pushed in front of me. And it's like, well, what if I did commit myself to that? Well, then I have to, and then it was successful. And then there's a voice that says, oh, but it would be so overwhelming. It would be so much responsibility because then you would just like not be able to stop. It would be overwhelming. You'd lose yourself to it, da da. And it's like, so why do we then judge that as bad, right? To say, oh, well, because we can say what was funny because we were talking about with you the possibility of just like, say like whatever, getting a place that was like a retreat center or B&B or whatever, right?
Right.
And you're like, oh, but then I always wanted to travel and blah, 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 except then you create other, distractions that prevent you from doing that anyway. So then the thing is,
Right.
but what if you just set it up so that it was something that opened doors to allow that even more, right? Instead of thinking it's a burden to take that on yourself, right? So that's what I was thinking about for me. Like, okay, so if it's not a burden to write a book and have it be successful and then write other ones and whatever, and it's just simply a conduit to allow my expression to really, really explode, in joy and bliss, um, then that would just be changing the energy. And that is complete trust, right? That is trusting and saying, okay, I'll take that on. I'll take that and raise you one, I'll take that and
Right.
raise you 10, you know?
Right. Well, it's funny because the card I drew this morning I haven't gotten before, and it was dear dear woman,
Hmm.
and it's temptation, and it's about being tempted by the and it goes into, it talks about sin, which I don't really ascribe to that term, but it talks about risky business ventures like extramarital affair and all these different things, and or something that potentially could be detrimental to your health. And so I equated it to, well, I thought it was reflective of what we talked about yesterday with following that passion and looking at something that potentially is self-supportive or not. So I never really looked at it as a temptation. I don't know. I like yours better.
Well, or maybe the distractions or the temptations, right? Because what is a what is a what is an extramarital affair, right? It's a distraction.
Right,
I mean,
right,
people can say what they want, but at the end of the day, it's running away from something that you don't want to face, right?
right, right,
And I'm not saying that with any judgment, but that's really, really the underlying purpose of having an extramarital affair, because either you would commit yourself to working with your partner to shift what it is that's like making, like not having it click, right?
right,
Or you would commit yourself to then moving on from the relationship first to resolve, complete all the lessons that you have,
Sure. So
whatever.
it's not necessary to recreate them in yet another relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, and like, like 19 times out of 20, the people I've worked with who were having an extramarital affair and then broke up with their spouse ended up not working out with the extramarital affair because they started having the same exact things start popping up in that next lesson,
Right.
right? In the next
Exactly. Exactly.
relationship. So really, it's the distractions, right? Those are the
Right.
temptations.
Right. Well, and if we go back to what I said earlier about how that's how we've created, that's how we have designed our behavior these days in the past
Yes.
to resolve and to look at whatever we needed to look at. And we've come to a place where we don't need that, but yet we haven't stopped the habitual creation
Yes.
of the distractions and the mirrors. Yeah. Laurel's on, by the way. She said she's got to find her headset. She just landed in Houston. So she's
Sure.
here. Um, but yeah, I really, I was looking at, the dog that I brought home with me. That's my daughter's dog. And this morning I was shown what triggers the behavior in him that is so difficult to deal with. And it struck such a chord in me that I was like, oh, I totally get it. I totally understand my connection with this dog now. not necessarily from a perspective of, oh, well, this is, meant to be. It's like, oh, I see the habitual need to rescue him because it's a reflection of me.
Hmm.
And I don't need that anymore. So I, I don't think I've ever seen guidance quite that clear.
Hmm. Yeah, it does come in very clearly right now, like a bitch slap to the head sometimes. But
Yeah, this wasn't quite that bad, although it may be by the end of the day because I've got to resolve it for he and for the dog and myself. Um, and maybe that's the path I chose to come to this place, the resolution. But obviously it is because he's here. Um, yeah, it's I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss of words about the whole thing now because it's like I can see it so clearly
right.
that it's like I just want to move through it now. Which before, I would always dance around it and
Yeah.
yeah, look at it. Yeah, yeah, I kind of see that, and I'll meditate on that, and I'll do that. And now it's like, oh no, I just want to plow through it.
Yeah, me too. But then that's the whole energy is like, you know what? And it was funny because and I think that the whole thing like with the HVAC unit this morning, it was just like a little punctuation, right? Because the other stuff has been very mercurial, right? It's been all over the place.
Right, right. Uh,
But it was
yeah,
like it was funny because my husband was like, "Well, do you want me to come home?" And I was like, "No."
I just want you to deal with it.
Called I said no because because you know what that equates to? That equates to him coming home thinking he can futz with it and make it better, right? Putting a band-aid on it
Right,
instead of just getting it fixed. And at the same time, because he's home and going back and forth, and he's going to ask me to do stuff, and it's going to take me away from the stuff that I need to focus on as well, right?
right,
And
right,
so it's a distraction. And I said no. And I literally said that to him, no, because I don't need the distraction. I have things I need to do. All we need to do is call the repair person and have them come out,
right, right.
you know. And that's the whole like it's really funny to think, wow, that's such a subtle little baby thing, but it's not because we put 100 subtle little baby things in our path sometimes out of these habits, right?
Exactly,
And then they
exactly.
end up taking up all of our time. They take up all of our energy.
Very
And then,
subtle.
yes, and then we say, oh, obviously I'm not supposed to do this because I can't get to it, right? Then we justify it that
Right,
way.
right. See, it didn't work out.
So, yeah. And it's good. It's great for us to see it. And now you're right. Now I'm just like, okay, so let's just get past this.
Right,
Let's just move on, shall we? You
right,
know? And and be done with whatever it is. So and part of that is truly trusting that even the most habitualized things can fall away so that we can clear our path to move into a completely different place.
right, right.
You know, and there's something about like, like we've been talking about how different we're going to be asked to be moving forward or that we're asking ourselves to be moving forward. And we dance around that a lot saying, "Oh yeah, like yay, unicorns and
Rainbows.
rainbows, right?"
Right,
But
right.
something I was looking at, and I was just looking at this whole like, oh, so this is what because I was like, okay, so let me look at this Outlander thing because we've been watching, Outlander, and we got through the whole second season like this week, and that was really what we did besides decorating the house. But
I haven't finished
um,
the second season.
yeah, we just finished it last night. So the thing that strikes me, so for anybody who hasn't watched, this woman. accidentally comes across this stepping through time thing, right? Through these Scottish stone circles, right? And so she walks through from 1945, right, to 17 something, right? And then she doesn't know how to get back. And then she ends up creating a life there in the 1700s in a very different world, right? And then she gets into the habit of being in that life, and then she walks back. Then she has to go back in 1948 for different purposes, whatever, into 1948. And she does go back. And just think about that. Think about how different that would be. Like, I was thinking about that last night, and I'm like, so thinking about, like, if we were required to, like, look at it from multiple lives, right? So if you said, okay, Sarah, you need to leave this life right now and go into your life that you were in 17 whatever, and be like, just walk into, by the way, don't be born into it, but just walk into it
Right.
and then adjust and change and be a different person. And yes, you can base it from where you are here into, like, and grow it into something else. But you have to leave all those habits behind, right? Because if you do that, then you can't do any of this stuff anymore because you
Right.
don't live in the same century, the same environment, the same culture, right? So that's
Right.
like, talk about forcing yourself to this extreme of how to change, right?
Right. Right.
So I was thinking about that going, well, we have that ability because in wholeness, we have all those aspects within us, right?
Right.
So maybe I don't know, maybe there's something about, like, in looking at wholeness, we feel like we still have to accept those parts of us that are habitualized, but maybe not optimal for expansion, you know? All right, that's not quite the words, but
No,
it's like,
I think I see exactly what you're talking about. It does seem very almost as if you're by embracing them, you're accepting a handicap that's no longer necessary.
right, right. But in wholeness, it's saying, I see the purpose you had. I thank you for it. And now we can just allow that to be assimilated into the whole instead of existing on its own as a separate facet, right?
Right. Right.
So maybe it's just shifting that kind of energy and being in wholeness. Maybe it's that realization of being in wholeness doesn't mean that we have to continue. It's not that we don't accept it all, it's that we don't continue with it all in its separate facets, but
And
allow it to just,
perpetuate it all.
and provide, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that feels good. Yeah. That feels good.
Yeah.
I
That feels real good.
just felt like a weight just got lifted.
I know, I do too. I do too. The dog stood up like, okay, are we done?
So, so part of, yeah. So I guess maybe that's where we focus today is just allowing ourselves in remembering wholeness to accept, but also resolve and just
Laurel,
reassimilate all that stuff.
Laurel says it makes sense to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's that it's it's almost like okay, we've come to that place of wholeness and that understanding, and now we need to allow the freedom of the wholeness, which is what letting go of these um, mirrors and restrictions or creations, if you want to call them that, distractions.
So, oh, that's what I'm sort of being shown. Okay, so it's sort of like, oh God, now it's just flying out of my head as quickly as I was seeing it. When you're saying that. Okay, so it's sort of what I'm sort of seeing is that it's sort of like when you work at a job, right? And then somebody leaves and you say, okay, I'll take on some of their stuff, right?
Right.
And you take on some of their stuff. and then it becomes part of your job. But nobody, you don't get a raise, you don't get, a promotion,
Yeah.
or you have,
Yeah.
and then you have somebody else leave, and then you're like, okay, well, I'll take on that part of the job
And it happens again, and it just
uh,
keeps happening.
again and again, and you're like, oh, I can handle this. I have this because I can handle it. The universe gives it to me because I can handle it, and it's like, except it's still a handicap
Right.
because
Well, and then at some point you realize you're doing the work of two or three people and being paid as if, and being rewarded, not necessarily paid, but being rewarded and respected and everything as the same.
right. Right, but it becomes just this need to have this external validation or this belief in martyrdom or I can do it. Like how many times you're, oh, well, I'm doing it because nobody else can, right?
Or I have no choice.
I have no choice. Or um, if I don't, who will do it? And it's like, well, who needs to do it then? Maybe
Right.
nobody needs to do it.
Right.
Why is it your job to decide, you know?
Right.
And so like it's like saying, okay, I'm going to continue doing this. In wholeness, like we're thinking from a place of separation. I'm going to continue doing this and everybody else's job because I can because I'm whole, right? But that's really not being whole. Being whole is saying
And
I'm the company, and the facets that exist can exist on their own as they resolve and assimilate back into the whole. But I can be the whole presence and choose my parts and pieces, like, and choose the ones that I want to embody right now without having to take on other people's jobs or other people's companies or whatever. It's like
right.
saying it's all part of me, but it's not my response. It's not for me to take my directed attention and limit and ignore everything else to do these little things because they're just if I trusted, they would just happen and be taken care of, right? On their own. Or something like that. It's not quite the right words, but it's around that. So
I think we've got the right energy, not necessarily the right
yeah.
words.
Yeah. So whatever that is, so that we can take away the burden of like what we believe is the burden of wholeness. Oh, there it is. The burden of wholeness. Like we were
Oh,
talking about it being overwhelming, right?
yeah. Yeah. And which is essentially aligning with it without the freedom.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, and shifting that to a place of wholeness equals freedom. It goes back to what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks about definitions, right?
And the
Because if
limitations of words. Right.
Right, because if we have this hidden agenda, hidden definition of wholeness as being, oh, I have to take on the burdens of everybody then and everything.
Right. Because I am everyone and everything.
Right, right.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's like, oh, well, of course it's going to be overwhelming. But if we say, no, I can just be whole and let everybody
Right.
else be whole as part of the facets of the whole, and then it's like, oh, well, that's easy. And I can see it and accept it and not have to take on a burden and separation. Because when you take on a burden, it's saying there's a lack somewhere that we believe is happening, which then is separation based
Right.
and not whole.
Which requires uh, different action on our part that
Yeah,
distracts from the wholeness.
yeah. So whatever it is, so we can shift that so that we're in a different place, and that changes the definition to a place of ease and freedom and letting go versus taking on. Oh, that feels a lot better. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's it. You ready?
I am.
All right. Oh, it started out choppy and then it got really smooth at the end for me.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Laurel made a comment, I think right as we were headed out there. Do I have a preconception about burden? Maybe they got cleared up and answered while we
Yeah,
were out there for.
I get nothing. It's like
Right.
I saw all these people out there. They were like, it's like the villagers kind of thing. It was like, oh, well, got to do this and got to do this, got to do this. It's like, no, actually, nope. And it all sort of like ran together like a watercolor or whatever. And then it was just like, oh no,
Well,
this
and
is
I got the very last thing I saw was that it's like all of this stems from that place of trust and wholeness, and that you don't need all those constructs.
right.
But it
Yeah,
was like,
that was like the swashing, like letting them all melt together. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know where I've seen this, whether it's fireworks in the sky or some special effect on the a screen. But it was just like I saw these small starbursts come from me and make like this, and they were white and make like this ring around me.
Nice.
And I saw it for both the dogs that are in here with me. And it was just so multiversal is the best word I can come up with. So expansive that it's like it aligned with all of it. It was so nice.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, there's something about that that I'm getting hit with, but I can't quite get it. So it's,
Yeah. Oh, that was beautiful.
it was. I feel much better than when we got on. So,
Oh, I do too. I do too.
all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. As usual, very productive time today. So we'll see you next time, next week, this same bat time, same bat channel. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.